Hello, everybody. I am Jane Finsale, and I am the Chief Exec here at Working Families, and I am absolutely delighted to be hosting this webinar today. This is all about how we should be normalising job shares and how we can all make them a success. For those of you who don't know us, Working Families is a national charity for working parents and carers, and our mission is to remove the barriers that working parents and carers face in the workplace. We like a bit of systems change, so we do this in 3 ways. We empower working parents and carers by helping them understand and use their workplace rights. And we do that through our free legal advice service, 200 plus advice pages on our website, and then we support people individually. The second thing we do is we work with employers, progressive employers, to help them embed flexible and family-friendly working. And then we take those 2 views, what we know is possible from the progressive employers that we work with, and what we know is not working from what we hear from parents and carers who call us on our helpline, to push for practical, positive policy change. We're very much about incremental improvements. Obviously, we'd love a giant leap into the future as well, but we don't dismiss small incremental improvements either. Last year, of course, we had that great success with the new flexible working legislation, which we worked on with Yasmin Qureshi. So we're absolutely delighted about that. But today is all about job sharing. And job sharing is one of the more long-standing forms of flexible working. It came to the rescue of women in the 70s and 80s who wanted to find a way to return to work and manage caring for their children, particularly those women who were being told that, you know, they were brain surgeons and now they could go and be a school secretary. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a school secretary, but not if you're trained as a brain surgeon. It continues to be a useful tool for women and for men for that very reason. It is particularly important because it allows for career progression. And especially for roles where reduced hours aren't feasible, job sharing provides a practical solution that unlocks flexibility for the individuals while also meeting the needs of the business. And there are enormous benefits to job sharing for both the employees and the employer. Job shares have the potential to help close the gender pay gap as women progress in careers whilst managing caring. But employers also can retain top talent through the prospect of a better work-life balance. In addition, job shares offer continuity for periods of leave, preservation of knowledge and skills should someone move on, as well as the doubling of unique skills, resulting in more creativity and enhanced problem solving. And today I'm delighted to say I am joined by Rachel Maguire and Hannah Hall-Turner, who are HR directors and co-founders of The Job Share Pair. Does what it says on the tin. They've worked in a job share arrangement together since 2019 in corporate and as business owners, with the aim to support job sharers to succeed and make job sharing a more accessible way of working. We're also joined by Sarah Hogan, who's the People Director in the Risk Division and Group Audit at Lloyds Banking Group, and by Nina Doran, who is Head of Diversity and Inclusion at the National Crime Agency. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. So, we're going to go straight into this because I think there are going to be tons of questions. So the first pair that I'm going to talk to are Rachel and Hannah, and I'm going to be asking them, starting from an employee perspective. Hannah and Rachel, can you talk us through why job shares are an important flexible working option, and what are your top tips to making a job share successful? And as you know, you've got about 10 minutes, so if you would go for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you so much for having us to talk about our favourite topic. So my name is Rachel Maguire. You will hear from Hannah as well. We're one half of the job share pair each. And we really feel that our role today is, having job shared successfully ourselves, is to really demonstrate how it can work brilliantly and hopefully persuade and convince you as employers and potential job sharers about how it can work for you. So a very potted version of our history is we worked in a large global corporate property firm for 12 years apiece. We had our first babies 6 days apart, and we'd really grown through the business. We were both on high potential programs. We'd done kind of brilliantly in our appraisals. We really wanted to stay on a high career trajectory, but also achieve a balance at home. So thankfully, became the first job share in the organisation of 5,000 people in the UK. And we're delighted to do that in the capacity of HR director. So why are job shares an important flexible working option? Using that as an example, they really enabled our return to work. If we hadn't been able to job share together or with another person, we wouldn't have returned to work. And we are, you know, very talented, ambitious women who have worked really hard on our careers in, you know, academics and also in terms of practical support. So we wanted to maintain that whilst finding a balance. So the roles that we occupied before we job shared were full-time and then some. We were really busy in our HR director roles that were full-time. And we knew that even stretching to 4 days a week would pose a risk to the business because there wouldn't be continuity and it would leave gaps. So that's part of the reason why we really wanted to pitch a job share to maintain that continuity. Job sharing is very different to part-time work. It is maintaining a full-time role across generally 2 or more people. So it means that you do have that continuity. You don't have the risk of working on your off days because it's a hindrance to the business, really. So it ensures continuity and progress. So a really unique factor of job sharing is that normally they're fulfilling a full-time role, but on the days when you're not at work, the other person is doing it. And with an effective handover, that can work really well. But it also means that if Hannah was unwell or if there was a reason for me to pick up, then I could do that. And also, you know, you don't get the kind of Wednesday hump day or the Friday lull. All the studies show that statistically job sharers are 30% more productive than a full-time equivalent because you have that kind of re-energized purpose to your week. And also, we'll talk about this in a handover capacity, but you have somebody kind of feeding you the priorities that need to be done before they then come back into the office a few days later. So I'll hand over to Hannah now to talk about the next steps.
Thank you, Rach. So hi, everybody. I'm Hannah. I'm the other half of the job share pair. I think the third point to make around why job sharing is a really important flexible working option is because you retain that high achieving talent. You know, job sharing gives you the flexibility that you need to balance your professional and your personal commitments without compromising your career progression. You know, all too often we hear about people who need to return to the workplace or, you know, go back after being a carer to roles that are less senior than they were before, because quite frankly, they're part-time. With job sharing, you don't get that. With job sharing, you can continue on a great career trajectory. And I think the final point to make around why job sharing is a little bit different and why it is very, very important is about leveraging that dual expertise. And that's something that when Rachel and I first started job sharing, gosh, 5 years ago, we found really, really surprising. And I cannot shout enough about the power of 2 minds in one role, 2 sets of skills, 2 sets of experiences. You know, we often talk about one of us starting a piece of work and the other one ending it, and the quality and the difference of the quality that means. And I think the final point on that dual expertise is what we've learned from one another. In a job share, you are a complete unique micro team. You work really closely with one another, yet you're not actually physically with one another all that often. But you learn a lot professionally and also personally. An example of that I'll give you is Rachel has a law degree. So she is, you know, really hot, as you can imagine on all things employment law, which is really important to us as HR directors. And working with her I was really able to upskill on my employment law knowledge, on the way that I would tackle certain things. And equally, Rachel will often say that she learned a lot about leadership and management from me. So that dual expertise has really helped us in our decision making, in the quality of work that we have, and the professional learnings for sure.
Thank you, Hannah. Seamless. So next we're going to talk to you about the top tips to make it successful, of which there are a few. Handover, communication, they're the linchpin of having a really successful job share partnership. So you need to be seamless from the outside. There's no real room for error because there is a loss of credibility generally with a job share, which is quite hard to regain, given that it's quite a new, not a new concept, but not a well-used concept. And every partnership that we've met has really focused on the importance of that and how they work their handover to make it fit for them. Setting boundaries, so establishing and understanding one another's boundaries and communicating those. Even if the reason for your job share differs, you know, for one person it might be childcare, for one it might be elder care, for one it might be for hobbies or for, you know, academics. So that's a really important thing. So identifying your non-negotiables as job share partners, where you will flex and where you can't flex, because ultimately you are working less, you are paid less. You need to set a boundary that really fits in with that practice. And then the people, you know, the nature of the person to job share is really important. We will advocate that job sharing can work across most professions, other than kind of space travel, air travel. It's probably a bit more challenging, but generally, you know, if it's not a shift work like retail, we always use the example of, you know, consultants in an ICU unit. They will job share, really. They work shifts, they hand over to the next person to see, you know, life and death situations through. So if we can't make that work in, you know, corporate capacities or business capacities, something's not quite right. However, you know, the nature of the people has to be that they leave their ego at the door. They are happy to accept praise and critique together as a piece of work. That they have really the same kind of work ethic to see things through, to see objectives through, to get to the main goal, which is ultimately you are perceived and can deliver as a successful job share partnership.
So to follow up on that, one of the most fundamental areas that you need to focus on for job sharing to be a success is trust. You know, we often laugh that, you know, job sharing is a little bit like a marriage. You have to be committed to one another. You have to be committed to your dual working values. You have to, you know, be accountable to one another. If Rachel in her handover to me says, Hannah, this week, you're part of the week, I need this to be done to progress things, I'm going to do it. So trust is really, really crucial when you share a role, because you are not only sharing your role, but actually you're sharing your career, right? You're sharing your credibility, you're sharing your profile. And I think for job sharing to work really well and to enable those boundaries that Rachel's just spoken about, you need to be comfortable with making decisions on behalf of somebody else. And equally, you need to be comfortable with accepting that some decisions have been made on your behalf. And, you know, sometimes you might not have made that decision, but it's really, really important to the business that you're working with that you present that united front and you talk about that behind closed doors. And so that sort of commitment to one another, the collaboration, the trust is really, really critical. And the point that we want to end on today around how to make job shares a success is all around the culture. So for job shares to be really, really successful, we say that there are three things that are critical. One of them is the job share partnership themselves. The next one is the support and the kind of infrastructure that you have around line management processes. But the third one is the working culture. And that culture needs to be supportive of job shares to be critical to success. So the organisation needs to value the benefits that it has. It needs to allow job sharing to be in an environment where it can thrive. And by that, I mean, great communication around what a job share is and why it's important and the benefits that it's going to bring to the organisation. Line management training where appropriate. But where that culture is supportive and where, it's not, job sharing isn't seen as like a fearful thing because it's a little bit different. Where it is supported, we have seen the most incredible outputs, not only to individuals, but also to organizations as well. And Jane pointed out earlier, some of the wider cultural things that job sharing can really improve, such as the gender pay gap. So where it's supported, we have seen really, really, really incredible outputs. So that ends our section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Hannah. That is such an impassioned and wonderful description of a brilliant job share pair. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on now to Sarah. And Sarah, looking at an employer perspective now, can you tell us why supporting job shares is important to you within Lloyds, and how have you gone about doing this?
I can, Jane. Thank you. Let me do a personal intro first of all. So Jane mentioned I'm an HR director at Lloyds Banking Group. So we employ 63,000 colleagues in the UK. I am an HR director. I'm also a co-chair of our women's network at Lloyds Banking Group. And perhaps most importantly for this conversation, I also work in a job share. So I'm a keen advocate of job sharing. I've worked for the group for 25 years across commercial, retail, central functions. Lots of that has been part-time. But latterly, I have worked in a job share with another HR director. So I'll be really happy to talk about that. But Rachel and Hannah, great to see. Dream team in action, and I wholeheartedly agree with so much of what you've said. So, but let me tackle this from the employer perspective. So, in an organisation that has the scale of Lloyds Banking Group, of course, flexible working is very important to us. But job sharing is important to us because it brings particular benefits from both the employer and the employee perspective. So from our perspective, certainly it supports the work that we're doing in terms of formal commitments that we're making externally around diversity, equity and inclusion, our strategy there in terms of making sure that we've got more women in our more senior roles. So at the moment, we've got around 14,000 of our people who work in reduced hours. Nearly 6% of those work in what we'd call senior roles. And 4.7% of those are women. Now, we've heard a lot about the fact that job shares are for everybody, and that's important. But what we see most definitely is a huge number of scenarios, like Rachel and Hannah's, where we have people returning from maternity, and it gives us a great tool to make sure that we're enabling career progression and that there are no barriers. So this point around boosting career progression for reduced hours colleagues, men and women, really resonates from my perspective in terms of the employer view. It certainly provides greater work-life balance, and we've got some great data in terms of mental health, actually, and some of the engagement work that we do internally to this point around the fact that if you work part-time, your brain doesn't switch off in the same way. You might still get that call, whereas when you work in a job share and you leave on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, whatever your work pattern, then you know somebody else is in the chair. Now that has an enormous benefit from a mental health perspective. So we see some huge health and well-being benefits, but that also helps with productivity. And so the double Monday bounce, right? So I'll come in on a Monday full of energy. My job share partner, Catherine, will arrive on a Wednesday. Two brains, all of the things that you've heard about already, has a marked improvement around productivity, but also coverage. And so it's a fantastic safety net for the business when things might go wrong. So in my own experience, there was a period of time where Catherine had to be away from work. She had a period of illness. She was off for a year. I was able to step in. We put in place a completely different construct around a job share. I took a more junior job share partner. We worked together, but we managed to provide coverage across the business. And so it's really flexible. You can make it work. And then, of course, there was great continuity when Catherine returned to work. And our partnership meant that I could support her back into the business. And so there are so many angles to consider from that employer perspective that I think is helpful, as well as the employee. It helps us to attract and retain talent, and also diverse talent, which is very important. And it helps us to retain people. And so that's about having a thriving employee proposition. And again, I'm going to draw on my own example. I was lucky enough to be promoted into a job share. I'd reached the stage in my career where I was working as a head of. I wasn't prepared to sacrifice any more time once I'd had my second child. And so when I was approached about promotion, I had said, I don't feel able to do that. But with the benefit of a job share, and finding that right partnership, I took a promotion. It helped me to offset some of the financial changes that I needed to make, and I haven't looked back since. And so there are some really smart ways of managing job sharing, both as a colleague and an employer, that can create some great opportunities for career progression. We've always supported job share at Lloyds Banking Group, but last year we made some specific commitments, and we put some more structured support in place to help colleagues who are interested in job share. So what we've done is we have made all roles available for job sharing on all of our internal adverts. That's supported by all of our recruiters and all of our hiring managers. It is process-led at the moment, so we have put controls in place to make sure that all of those adverts go live, because in an organisation of our scale, we still face into some of those questions from hiring managers, some of those insecurities about job share. But we have absolutely made all roles available. And I wholeheartedly agree that in an organisation like this one, I would challenge anybody who said you cannot do this role in a job share, right? So at Lloyds Banking Group, we have client-facing job shares. We have colleagues who are working around a bridge to retirement, upskilling new and more junior colleagues. We have mixed grade. We have executives. I'm part of the top 300 at Lloyds Banking Group, and I work in a job share. So we too use that same example, that if a brain surgeon can do it, then I'm sure a bunch of bankers can too. Okay. So we've also made some dedicated support and guidance available. So that's for colleagues, but also for managers and recruiters. So, how do I go about interviewing a job share? What about one-to-ones? How should I manage those? All of those sorts of things. It's a suite of materials that we host on our interchange. And so just simple how-to guides around some of the common questions that we understand. The particular sort of build for us this year has been the launch of a job share tool, which helps people to find a match, which is often the feedback that we get from our colleagues internally can be most difficult. And so we've put a tool in place. We've got about 190 people using that tool at the moment. And it helps them match skills, amongst other things, locations, etc. And the other key piece for me is sponsorship. So I do an awful lot of it, but advocacy at senior levels, right up to our Chief People Officer, our Group Executive Committee, and the people who talk to their wants and desires around a flexible workforce is super important. So we have those role models in all parts of our business, doing those different roles and constructs of job share that I've already mentioned. So in terms of what's next for us, we'll just continue to embed that proposition. We're not setting any hard targets. I think sometimes that can drive the wrong behaviours. But we will continue to evolve the proposition. The role modelling piece in particular, we continue to work on. So I quite often host webinars with our own internal colleagues and line managers of job shares who can talk and advocate for what it's like to line manage a job share and how they see the benefits. And so we're doing lots of that work internally. We're supporting our managers with recruitment. And now the last piece for us, if we continue to see it building, will be to think about how we can extend that proposition and the matching of job shares to an external market as well as internal, and looking at how we might utilise some of the partnerships to help colleagues find a match outside of the organisation that they might want to bring, so that they can work together and bring more talent in. So those would be my sound bites, Jane, from the employer perspective.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was absolutely brilliant, and both kind of an internal and an external perspective, an insider's view and an outsider's view. I love it. And I love the phrase you used about line managers having insecurities about how to manage. I think that's a much kinder way of talking about it, because most line managers are actually decent human beings. You know, obviously there's the odd exception, but and it's just that they want to do it right, but they're not entirely sure how to do it right. So great that you're putting all of that support in place. Thank you so much. And Nina, I'm going to come to you next. You kindly spoke at a roundtable event we held back in November 2022, which is an awfully long time ago, sharing why you've prioritised job shares, and you outlined the job share platform launch literally a few days before the session. That recording is available to all of our members in the past events section for anyone who's interested. And a year on, I understand you've taken a slight pivot in your approach. Can you talk us through the last year since you launched your job share initiative? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you. And also just listening to Rachel, Hannah and Sarah, just their different experiences. It's been really fascinating to hear everybody. I've never actually been in a job share myself. I've been part-time, but I work, part of my role within the agency, I've been there now for about 18 years, and which scares me slightly. And I have always been an advocate for flexible working and chair the flexible working group, which is why I was so passionate about job shares and kind of getting that kind of highlighted into the agency. I'll just talk quickly, just very briefly about our agency. So nowhere near on the scale of Lloyds Banking Group. We are about 5,800 offices. We are made up predominantly of people who are powered, who are operational, but we have some very key command areas such as HR, enabling capabilities, where job shares need to be available to everybody. We work under the umbrella of the civil service, so everything we do has to align to that policy and guidance. But also the work that we do and the progression that we have to strike the balance between being able to move across the agency, but also the progression and the wider civil service. So it's very complex and vast with the range of roles that we have. And that kind of was why job shares were so important, because it was quite difficult to, with some of the role that you do, to kind of find someone that might be interested in a job share that might not necessarily be working within your local area, your local branch, or one of the main hubs. So our aim was to boost job shares as a flexible working option in the agency. Like I mentioned about the flexible working group, we've got a range of diversity groups in the agency which cover protected characteristics, but the internal job share network was an initiative that came out of the flexible working group. And we worked with HR to firstly develop back in 2021 in particular, a document, a job share guidance. So that kind of covered all aspects about how you find a job share partner, the process of applying. It also talks about, and I've noticed the question in one of the chats about, what happens when a job share partner might leave, or for example, if something's not working with a job share partner. So first of all, it was really important for us to just have the foundation of the guidance. And then the next step was we replicated the civil service job share matching tool. That's now moved across onto the civil service job finder. But having that tool, having a replication, it just meant that you could put in your skills, rather than looking at like length of service or your qualifications, it was more about skill sets, what skills you had that would match then to be a job share, to find you a job share partner. So the job share network allowed you to identify someone already employed within the agency, because we already had the civil service matching tool externally. So this was really for to help you internally. So for example, if you're an officer in a current post which has been identified suitable for job share, and you're looking for a job share to fill either that post or for future posts with progression in particular in mind. Also for our internal lateral campaigns, and then we've also got our internal promotion campaigns, and then also helping you revert back out to kind of apply for a substantive role. So in our agency, if something comes up as external, if something comes up permanent, you still have to apply externally to be successful for that post. So really, that was a way to kind of boost job share as a flexible option and to make that mechanism easier for everyone. So we created a really simple way of having a job share network, which is an email address. We previously had a form that we would then get you to complete, and we then periodically would circulate the matching tool to those that are part of the network seeking a job share partner. We kind of emphasised a bit, there's no guarantees that we'd be able to help find a suitable job share partner, but the aim was to provide that added mechanism to support. We also have mentioned about the civil service matching tool. Having it mirrored was almost like we cheated. We kind of went off what was best practice, and that kind of helped us then bring it into the agency. But as Jane's mentioned, we are now in a slightly different place, and I'm just going to kind of talk about that. So where are we moving towards? So our agency is very data driven, and our diversity data tells us that the scores for people who work part-time or in a job share are higher than the NCA average in the majority of some core themes around technology, taking action, resources and workload, pay and benefits. They're 10% higher than the NCA average, which is something that people have really looked at and gone, okay, what else can we do with this? So the overall themes was resoundingly in favour of flexible and remote working and continued advancements in that area. Having that highly positive trend overall indicates that officers with a work-life balance, which we've already mentioned, the agency engagement, acknowledging people and their needs for that reciprocal flexibility positively impacts our wider issues around diversity in the agency. And as part of the people strategy, so in our agency, we've got an overarching strategy, and we've got a very focused people strategy to create a highly skilled workforce. So we have some big actions that we've committed to further strengthen our female talent pipeline in middle management and senior management grades. So moving on to like the job share hub. So we've got some following actions now, which are starting to have a positive impact in the agency, which kind of goes in with the job share. So all of our recruitment activities are aligned to best practice, and we encourage applications from female candidates as well as underrepresented groups. So within that, we've made sure that there's a clear mention about job share. We haven't actually what Sarah's mentioned around the default. We actually haven't got the default for all posts advertised as job share, but we do have the default that all adverts should be advertised as flexible working. So that's something I'm going to be taking back myself today, and actually I'm going to be championing that's something that we should also think about doing ourselves. For example, any new recruitment that we have now has a starting position to advertise roles as suitable for full-time, part-time and flexible working. The job share, when we advertise a post currently, job share is like a separate box that we have. And what we do ensure, though, is all of our applications for an alternative working arrangement have to be considered on a case-by-case basis. And that allows then a good discussion between the line manager, the hiring manager, and the officers that are thinking about applying for a job share. It also facilitates a wider range of applicants. It's a no-brainer. And for us in our agency, particularly operational roles where it's harder to recruit into, in particular, people who more women and those who kind of need a flexible working arrangement, this is quite a key thing for us. We also continue to offer internal promotions opportunities. So that was something we didn't do before. It's something that we're trying to push more and more now, including flexible locations. So we've got the concept of the job share, but it's making sure that all the other elements that come around a job share, the flexibility within that, is making sure that that's the other bit that we add to it, because it's quite easy for us to say, oh, we've got this as a job share, but it's really encouraging hiring managers, the officers, showing them how it works. So we're moving into a new job share hub. So that process of being designed for officers to express an interest in job share opportunities back into central recruitment. So currently, as it stands, our model for a job share network sits out with, we work within the diversity group and HR, we work and collaborate together. But the idea is now that the job share hub will move to a more centralised process, which within the recruitment area. And it's a positive step forward for us because it centralises the job share network. And I think it creates a more joined approach for us to work with recruitment as well. Currently, if an officer wishes to move to a job share working pattern, they normally discuss that with their line manager. And then if the idea is they utilise the job share network to find a job share partner. If they're unable to do that, that is when we normally advertise the post, and we will look to fill that either internally or externally. We can do it depending on what the nature of the role is, depending on if it's permanent or temporary. But by moving it to the job share hub, that should just centralise that whole process, because if the officer, like I mentioned, hasn't identified a job share partner, then we have to work, they have to work with the HR SPOC, which is separate to our HR business partner. It sits within the command. And then we do a bit of extra comms around it through the diversity work, diversity groups. So this, I think overall, it's going to be a much easier way to do job matching. But what's really exciting is the fact that they've taken this forward in recruitment and they've gone, yeah, we're going to take that as a function. So for us, it's a small win. I'll be sad to see the job share network go, but for us, actually seeing it centralised into a hub will just make the process better. So it's an exciting step forward. And then just finally, I just wanted to touch on how we launched it. So we launched the Job Share Network. We did a mini series of events, and we used the National Work-Life Week with Working Families to highlight the activity that we were doing. We also hosted a range of webinars, Q&A with people who had different experiences of job share partners. And we had a couple of male senior managers as well. We wanted them to share their experience of why they went into a job share and how it worked for them, because retention of skills is one of the big issues for us. It's a challenge. Our average age is 44. We know the birth rate's dropping. So we know that actually that average age might increase over time, and therefore we really need to make sure that a job share is for everybody. And actually for us, it allows that retention of skills and that progression for other people coming up through the different grades. So following on from this then as well, we found that the flexible working group, we still have inquiries mainly from people who have identified a job share partner, but want to know more about the mechanics of how it works day to day practically. So going forward, our intention is when we work with, sorry, Jane, when we work with recruitment, we're going to be doing a lot more webinars and a lot more of that throwing the spotlight on events. I did this last time, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina. That was brilliant. I just love that stat that people working flexibly are 10% more productive. And it's not surprising in the sense that they also have a better work-life balance, because they're just not exhausted 100% of the time. So I love that. Thank you so much, Nina. We're going to move on to the questions from our audience now. But I just wanted to say we've had some questions from individuals for some advice and tips. So thank you for that. But for this session, we're going to focus on questions aimed at employers to maximise the time we have with Lloyds and the National Crime Agency with Nina and Sarah. But we will capture your questions and respond to these in our follow-up email. So first questions for the panel, and this first one is for Sarah. And the question is, we're really keen to embrace job sharing, but one of the concerns we often come up against is what happens for both the job sharer and the employer when one partner moves on. Do the panel have reflections about how this can be made to work really well? And Sarah, if I could ask you to respond to that one.
Yes, of course. It's a very common question. And I understand entirely why, you know, people might have reservations about it. But for us, I would have to say, as you might expect in an organisation of scale, we take a position that says actually we should be able to provide another partner, right? But in smaller organisations, that can be more challenging. So there are a few observations that I would make. The first is that job shares are a real partnership. So you heard Rachel and Hannah talking about the fact that it's a bit like a marriage. So on that basis, where you have a healthy job share, I'd find it really unusual for one not to understand or know that the other had reservations or was looking to move elsewhere. And so ordinarily, I would expect that a job share was having a conversation about that and making some of their own plans, right? And I think that's something as line managers that we can set out from the outset in terms of expectations and the fact that this is a two-way street, right? So when you work in a job flexibly, there has to be a mutual respect around the requirements. And so there's something about the accountability for us as job shares in that. But the other piece is, frankly, just having the house in order around succession and having eyes out to, right, who might be the next person to step into one half of this job share, which is something that I would absolutely expect that individuals can be thinking about with a view to other people in the organisation. So succession would be one piece, but I would also then say think more laterally about the other solutions should the worst happen and should somebody leave without notice or explanation. And that's when I think you look at things like, is there a junior partner? Is there someone potentially pre-retirement who might help us with sort of, you know, reducing hours because they're keen to go but might stay and help us part-time? Is there something that we could do in the interim? What quite often we found is that one half of a job share is prepared to go maybe 4 days a week or maybe even full-time for a shorter period because they'll see the financial benefit whilst we recruit and we work externally if we need to. So I think there are options, but it's just about having that really good quality succession in place and a mutual understanding with the job share around expectations and that two-way street, Jane.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah. I love that idea of somebody stepping up or stepping sideways. I think those are both such great options. So the next question is for you, Rachel and Hannah. And the question is, what advice would you have for hiring managers that have reservations about advertising and recruiting job shares?
Yes, so again, can understand the reservations given that it's not common practice. I think what I would challenge that question is what difference would it make if it was an individual person? So what we're often asked is, well, what happens exactly what Sarah's just fielded? What happens if somebody leaves? What happens if somebody underperforms? What happens if somebody's promoted? Or all of the what ifs, but in reality, or if they don't have great relationships, or if they can't build those up in a team, all of those things still exist as an individual when you recruit. When you recruit somebody, you're taking a leap of faith and assessing the situation as it is. So by not advertising for you know, more broadly, there is a hugely untapped talent pool that you are completely missing out on of people who are looking for that flexible work. What we've actually found is that some recruiters, where you've got, you know, businesses that have put on a job spec and said very much open to job sharing or flexible work, is that recruiters have had instances where they've made a match themselves and said, I've met Rachel, I've met Hannah, they're both qualified, they're both looking for something part-time. Maybe we can do a chemistry session with them and see if they can do the full-time coverage. So that really helps in terms of when you've got a ready-made job share. But also kind of piggybacking on the last question, just while I've got the floor, you know, I went on maternity leave. Hannah and I job shared for a few years. I went on my second maternity leave, and our business recruited in my maternity cover in a job share capacity. Now, although it breaks my heart given my relationship with Hannah, they worked as successfully as Hannah and I did together. Their skills were complementary. They'd not known each other before. It was very much a new partnership, but it worked really well. So I think that having an open mind to these things and seeing what comes in, you know, if you're opening a job advert to open to job share, you know, you're giving people the opportunity to come to you, and you can make an assessment then as to whether they would be a fit for the role. So change is a good thing, and it's worth, you know, in our minds, giving it a go.
Anything from you, Hannah, or you're just supporting everything Rachel said?
As ever, I'm incredibly supportive of everything that Rachel said, Jane. I think, you know, in summary, yes, change is scary, and as I guess a hiring manager, sometimes it can feel like you might be taking on double the workload around recruitment if you're recruiting a job share. But if we counter that with, you know, that untapped talent pool that Rachel has spoken about, the benefits that it can bring to your organization, I think we can put together a bit of a business case to persuade those hiring managers, hopefully.
Thanks very much indeed, Hannah. We've got another question, and Nina, I'm going to put this one to you, partly because of something that you said about 5 minutes ago, which was that you are now going to go back and have a conversation about advertising all jobs as job shares as well. So we think the move, the question is, I think the move to advertise all jobs as job share is really important and encouraging. Zurich now advertise all their jobs as part-time, job share and full-time, which has been very successful for them. Do you think that all employers would benefit from making this move?
The big ones, yes. I mean, all employers should, but I think it's the practicalities of it as well, and also understanding your organisation. So our organisation is made up of very different commands, and every role is very different. And it's amazing how many roles that we have that are very unique as well. They're specialist roles. We don't have 10 of that. So even to get a job share into that, we have to be, every job will have to be tailored. So I think for me, by having, in terms of like a law enforcement hat on, if you have a diversity way of thought, if we bring that into the agency, that makes us more diverse in the way we combat serious organised crime. So that's why diversity is so important, to bring it into the agency. And having flexible working and recognising it means that we can be very dynamic around how we recruit, we can be smarter, and we can be smarter progressing. So I would say every employer, where possible, should always default to it. With the job share, because it's something that has come after our flexible working in the agency around part-time and full-time and alternative working arrangements of compressed hours, where job share has kind of been more developed more recently, back when the guidance was in 2021. That's why it's kind of been more of a separate process that we've had, you know, because we've got a job share over a full-time role. But I think going forward, if we can, where we've got the job share hub, if we can default all posts to that, I think it will just be beneficial for any employer to have. It's a no-brainer for me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nina. And just for the audience, I just wanted to remind you all that we have our Happy to Talk Flexible Working logo. It's a free resource, and it's on our website for employers that have a genuinely flexible approach. So do have a look at that. And the next question is, again, back to Sarah. Sarah, considering roles as a director, director general and CEO level, does the panel have suggestions on how to pitch these sorts of strategic roles as a job share and addressing any concerns from employers about a divided strategic lens, etc.?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, right? So I would say working in an executive role as a job share, there probably is an overhead for Catherine and I because we work in a relationship-based role. So a lot of this is about working through conversations that we might have had. There's an awful lot of verbal in our handover, things that we might not write down around, you know, the work that's ongoing or some of the strategic overheads. And so there is quite a lot that goes on in the role in addition, given that sort of relationship base. But one of the things that we talk about a lot working at scale as an exec is that our job share will never be an overhead to anybody. So it will not be an overhead to any member of our team, to any client that we partner, or to our line manager. And I think it's a really interesting narrative for anybody who wants to consider a job share, because there shouldn't be any reason that it's an overhead. It shouldn't mean more than managing any other person. And so I think that's valid. Otherwise, I would talk about exactly the same principles with more strategic roles. You have two brains, you have two quite forceful opinions that don't always agree. Catherine and I can come at things from very different perspectives, and we don't always agree. But actually, in the role that we undertake, when you think about regulatory monitoring, oversight, and all sorts of things, that gives you a really brilliant and safe oversight of the decisions that you're making together. So I actually think the job share provides more benefit and security in terms of the decisions that you're taking in the interests of the employer. I'll stop there because I could talk on, Jane, but that would be my brief summary.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's those two brains looking at one problem and coming up with an extraordinary solution. Nina, I'm going to ask the next question to you. What's helped to move the culture forward on job shares within the National Crime Agency?
Good comms, really good comms. So working families has been great for us. It's been essential because actually it's lifted that profile. So on our candidate information packs, our recruitment, we use that strapline. I know it was mentioned, happy to talk flexible working, but we've also those webinars, those lunch and learn sessions, having those Q&A. So it's very easy to maybe just go, oh, we'll do it once a year for the National Work-Life Week. What we've actually done is we try and do it through the year, or we showcase something. So if HR are doing a spotlight on their policy, we'll also join in with that. And so by having it through the year, that means we capture a wider audience, and just having people's lived experiences like today, having people speak today, it really helps with kind of understanding, oh, okay, that's how it could work for me. And listening to people from totally different backgrounds as well has been really helpful for us. I think having the two men, senior managers, talk about what made them have a job share in the first place, I think we had such good feedback from that. So yeah, it's just talking about it, the practicalities as well as the guidance is very key, the comms through the year.
Thank you, Nina. And the other thing that I would add very briefly is you clearly also got the data, which
Yes.
I love. And finally, Rachel and Hannah, this is, I think, going to be our last question. Do you have advice on receiving applications from a job share and sifting these two applications, and how to assess this as one application alongside a suite of other applications from single candidates?
Yes, we absolutely do. And I've placed job shares in organisations, as well as obviously working in a job share. And I think one of the things that I always look for as an HR director is around about 60% match in terms of experience to the role, and that 40% growth. You know, and actually when you're putting job shares together, what's really important is that complementary skill set. And when I've put job shares together in the past, I've always looked for around about the same level of expertise and experience for new roles, that's for sure, where kind of working values are quite similar, and you can assess that through things like chemistry meetings, through the interview process, but it is quite difficult to do it on paper. So I would say, you know, assess that kind of 60-40%, for sure. Have I missed anything, Rach?
I think I would just say, often when we have spoken to people who've been matched by recruiters or elsewhere, there seems to be a level of when things jump out at you. So one person has, you know, this part of the role covered, and this person actually has the other, and that is where the complementary skill set really can knit together really well. With organisations that are really committed to looking at job shares and how they recruit and how they make that work, and if they have a particularly kind of cash-rich aspect to it. We've known that some organisations have used kind of Thomas profiling or MBTI or Hogan to really make those kind of recruitment assessments, where the reports can cost kind of 100, maybe £200, and you can get a level and an assessment of how people would work together, and you know, how that chemistry would go even before meeting. So that's another thing that might be worth considering.
I'm going to stop it there. Thank you, everybody. This is, as ever, we never have enough time. It just is brilliant, the conversation that we've been having, and looking at all of the things that you've mentioned, the chemistry, the data, the two brains coming together, all of those things, to both be in a job share and to manage a job share, so that it all just becomes part of the normal part of work that we all do. So thank you so much, Nina, Sarah, Hannah, and Rachel. It's been wonderful to host you today. We will, for the audience, be sending out a recording of this session for you to watch back or share with colleagues, particularly those who might have one or two insecurities about job shares. We'll also be sharing our job sharing toolkit, which is a free resource for you to use. If you've enjoyed this conversation and you want to learn more about working families, and thank you very much, Nina, for the shout out about how brilliant we've been, to support flexible, family-friendly ways of working within your organisation, please get in contact with our Employer Services team. You can find the link on our website, and we'll also include more information about our employer memberships in our follow-up to this event. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.